Piscataway, welcome in my tribal language to the 2020 7th Annual American Indian Heritage Month Kickoff. This is a event to commemorate the month, one of the commemorative months here in the state of Maryland, and it is being held first time ever virtually. My name is Keith Colston. I serve as the Administrative Director for the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, and I serve as the Director of the Ethnic Commissions for the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. To celebrate our kickoff here in a virtual setting, what we've actually done, ladies and gentlemen, has been very much done in reality. And we're talking about the incredible work working through COVID-19, also the constant virtual meetings, whether it be for this event or for other things taking place, to make this event not only happen, but really doing what we are asked to do and what's required of us to serve Marylanders in general. So I just want to say in Yahweh, my language, to each and every person who's done so and continues to do so. On this day, ladies and gentlemen, for this evening and all the things that will be done, it is truly an example of tribal communities working with native and non-native communities for the betterment of us all. And again, to persevere through an unprecedented time here in the state of Maryland. This event will definitely start off with some phenomenal speakers, those who have agreed to serve as panelists, and the exchange of words that will take place. Again, I'm sure that we'll be able to utilize many times later on in the future after our kickoff here tonight. Also, we'd like to express how much that what they'll do will truly either help create new avenues, new initiatives, or strengthen the partnerships that we already have with the organizations and entities that they represent. So before I go any further, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to make a special presentation. This was decided upon by the commissioner, and it was also approved by the following, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to make sure I read this correctly. And as you can see on the slide that may be on your screen, if you choose to view that, the state of Maryland, be it known, the citizens of Maryland offer this memorial tribute to the memory and the life achievements of the beloved Marylander, and extend our heartfelt sympathy to the family of Lillian Diana Savoy, Piscataway Conoy tribe. This respectful expression of condolence to be presented on this second day of November 2020, signed by Governor Larry Hogan, Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, and Secretary of State John Robinson. Ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to present this to Madam Chair Lisa Savoy on behalf of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. It is truly our expression of admiration and love for a woman that many of us during our meetings, events, and whenever we would see her, we many times refer to her as Mom. And so once again, affectionately, we present this to you, Madam Chair Savoy.
On behalf of my siblings and myself, I thank you.
At this time, folks, I'd now like to call upon an individual who is no stranger to many of us. He's a tribal elder who is known throughout Maryland as a cultural historian, providing information in the language of his people, as he'll do here tonight. And he's served as a tribal speaker, and he is a past commissioner for the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Mr. Rico Newman for our invocation.
Tuena ma o ilang komoki. Eko Jose na wenge chaplikon o Piscataway Wicomico yapio kana hagari. Good evening, friends and relatives, and welcome. It is always our obligation to identify ourselves by our tribal affiliations. And with that said, then I would like to say a brief prayer in the Algonquin language. And I invite you to say a prayer, because we need prayer in these days, in whatever way that you acknowledge that power greater than yourselves. Ishilamukon, Wileshta, Di Pitalogagun, Aki Angagu, Aki Dashuki, Aki Angu, Yawua Yawashe, Ishalamakon, Wanishi, Shaguna Yunka Angagu Wanishi, Uhurayunka angawanishi. Uhurashin angawanishi. Wapuna yunka angawanishi. Michelle Macon, Matunamani Monishi Pusi. I have asked Creator to continue to give us those blessings that aren't those that come from man or any government, those things that the earth provides us without our asking, and that we honor the earth and celebrate those blessings that she gives us every day. Wapuna Jokomadasaki. Aho.
Aho.
At this time, I'd like to call upon the Chair of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, Madam Chair Lisa Savoy, for welcoming remarks via phone.
Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2027th Annual American Indian Heritage Month Kickoff Commemorative Month event. My name is Lisa Savoy, and I am the Chair of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. I want to first thank the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives and our first ever virtual kickoff, and for hosting us here today. I also would like to recognize any VIPs, delegates, and thank you for your attendance. We are here today to celebrate November as American Indian Heritage Month, as one of the commemorative months celebrated by legislation. We are here to recognize the accomplishments of our youth and adults, law enforcement, and tribal leaders. A special thank you to Delegates Murphy and Branch, who sponsored this legislation, and Governor Larry Hogan's acknowledgement through his proclamation. During the entire month, we recognize and honor the historical and cultural significance of the American Indian community here in Maryland by celebrating not just today, yet each day in November. We celebrate this month, yet reminded of the turbulent times we all face during COVID-19 and the social climate we all face here in our great state and those outside of our borders nationally. Working with Governor Larry Hogan and his administration concerning the health, economy, education, overall customer services to all Marylanders has been greatly felt. We will continue to assist Governor Hogan in the fight against COVID-19 in any communities by working with Director Keith Colston to distribute personal protective equipment so that our elders, young adults, and children can have the best chances to remain healthy and prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Along with the 20 initiatives that have been instrumental and shared by Director Colston, we remain steadfast with the duties set by the legislation that established the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. We hope that you will enjoy our panel discussion. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for each of our panelists, their work, leadership, and participation. In closing, the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs will remain dedicated to our roles as commissioners that are here to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go any further, I would also like to comment briefly on COVID-19 with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, working with the private sector, state agencies, as well as commissioners. We have provided over 21,000 PPEs to our tribal communities. Again, personal protective equipment. This has been taking place from the very beginning. We've had various individuals who have assisted, and I could not go any further without, again, saying and respecting all of those individuals for assisting the way that you have, again, through this unprecedented time in our state. And so I just want to comment briefly in reference to COVID-19 and the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take the role of moderator at this point. This is where we're going to begin our panel discussion for our 2020 7th Annual American Indian Heritage Month Kickoff. We are honored to have the presence of our panelists during our kickoff to help us commemorate the month and it being what it is, as we know that many of us will celebrate throughout the month itself. And we also know as Indian people, as Native individuals, as Indigenous people, every day is such a wonderful day to be Native and to be able to represent who we are. But for our panel discussion here this evening, our theme is Pathways to Partnerships. And each of our panelists will be providing us 10 minutes of their strategies and ways that, again, those can be either created or, again, improved on. We'll also leave about 20 minutes in reference to our audience to be able to ask questions, again, for that 20-minute time period. Our expected outcomes, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is to share information, strategies, choices, and how to create and strengthen those partnerships with our tribal communities and those beyond. I'd like to, at this time, introduce each of them individually, and I'd like to share some information about them. As impressive as they are, I'm going to look down a little bit at some paperwork. I don't want to miss anything in reference to the information being provided. Reverend Dr. Tamara England Wilson is the pastor of New Season, New Day Church and Ministries. She is also the founder of Journey Ministries Incorporated, which provides programming to empower women to embrace their authentic selves in order to fulfill their purpose and achieve their personal best. The author of The Journey to Self, Who Knows What a Woman Can Be When She is Free to Be Herself. Reverend Wilson holds degrees from the University of Maryland at College Park, St. Mary's Seminary and University, and United Theological Seminary. She is a very passionate advocate for the preservation, strengthening, and empowering of the African American community and devotes much of her time working with various community and civic organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, she also serves as the chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. I'd also like to introduce and read in reference to Dr. Angela Stoltz. She is the assistant clinical faculty in the University of Maryland, College Park's Division of Teaching, Learning, Policy, and Leadership, which is housed in the College of Education. Her role as an assistant clinical faculty, Dr. Stoltz serves as the middle grades mathematics and science professional development school coordinator, where she oversees the middle grades mathematics and science undergraduate and graduate interns and their university supervisors, and serves as a liaison between mentor teachers located at partnership development school sites and administrative staff at the University of Maryland's College of Education. Dr. Stoltz has worked to include issues of access, equity, and diversity in K-12 STEM classrooms into her courses, including the development of materials that support pre-service and in-service teachers' understanding of Indigenous education, Indigenous communities, and resources in Maryland, and strategies for supporting Indigenous students in K-12 classrooms. Our third panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is Ms. Kimberly Qualls. She is currently the director of the Office of Treatment Services, OTS, within the Division of Clinical Services. The Clinical Services Division, Office of Treatment Services, is a division and unit of the Maryland Department of Health, Behavioral Health Administration. Ms. Qualls is a licensed clinical professional counselor with over 30 years of experience as a human service administrator in the field of behavioral health. Her current role, she is responsible for the planning, design, development, implementation, and monitoring of effective community-based behavioral health treatment services for the state of Maryland. In 2017, MDH was awarded funding from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in the amount of $10 million per year for 2 years for the Maryland State Targeted Response Grant, which is known as STR. Ms. Qualls served as the project director and was instrumental in facilitating STR goals and objectives, which were to prevent opioid misuse and abuse through enhanced prescriber practices and public awareness, treat opioid dependence on expanding treatment and increasing quality, prevent overdose fatality, and expand recovery support in the community. I don't want to take too much of her thunder away, as she will be expounding on the state opioid response concerning tribal communities. So at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask Reverend Dr. Wilson, would you like to start us out?
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'd just like to say congratulations on tonight, and I look forward to the discussion. So as the chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, I'd just like to share a little bit about us and our focus. We are the first ethnic commission in the nation. We are still one of only 9 African American commissions in the nation. And we provide oversight of the Banneker Douglas Museum in Annapolis, and it is the state's official museum on African American history and culture. We also administer the state's $1 million African American Heritage Preservation Grant. And this year we are celebrating our 10th year, meaning that we have given away $10 million over the last 10 years to preserve African American sites around the state. So in addition to being a resource for preserving and documenting the African American experience in Maryland, we are very involved, or actively involved, I should say, in fighting against systemic racism that has historically impacted African American people. It is our desire to be a model for social change and community, and to build coalitions to dismantle white supremacy in our state. Now, as the largest civil rights movement in our nation's history continues in the midst of this deadly pandemic that is impacting African Americans disproportionately, we have embarked on an anti-racism initiative to end systemic racism, to promote racial healing, and to promote community wellness. Our programs, our exhibitions and collections encourage social justice practices and community building, such as our annual youth conference, which this year was held virtually. We had over 4,000 attendees, which we were just so excited about. We also participated in with Future History Now to install the Breonna Taylor mural in Annapolis. We have plans to develop an anti-racism coalition and training series for youth and adults. And so, as you can see, we are a very hardworking commission, and we welcome the opportunity to partner in ways that are mutually beneficial for both commissions to forward your mission to bring about change for the Native American community. And so once again, I thank you for inviting me to participate in this discussion tonight.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Wilson. At this time, we'd like to ask Dr. Stoltz.
Hi, thank you, Keith, for introducing me. I first would like to acknowledge that the University of Maryland is built upon the ancestral and unceded lands of the Piscataway chiefdom. And as a university faculty at the University of Maryland, I recognize that as a university, we've historically, personally, and collectively benefited from the occupation of Piscataway lands. I recognize also that it's my responsibility to acknowledge this occupation and the negative impacts it's had on the Piscataway people, their land, and ecosystems, which are vital to their way of life. I would also like to acknowledge the Nanticoke, Accahonac, Nazi-Wawash, and Wicomico tribes who are also indigenous to Maryland. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the many Maryland citizens who represent numerous Native nations from across the U.S. here in Maryland. For this event, Keith asked me to speak about pathways to partnerships between the University of Maryland and Maryland's Indigenous communities. I appreciate being invited to share my thoughts on how we can develop meaningful and mutually beneficial partnerships across institutes of higher education and Indigenous communities in perpetuity. The first thing I'd like us to consider is how we establish a foundation for pathways for partnerships and why these partnerships don't already exist. From my perspective, we need to look boldly and honestly at the Maryland colony's historical relations with Indigenous communities. And we need to acknowledge that the colonial practices established by the Maryland colonies in the 1600s are deeply embedded in our current social, political, educational, and economic infrastructures, and they perpetuate violence against Indigenous communities. This violence is expressed in many ways that have detrimental effects on our Indigenous communities' physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Thus, when considering what it means to develop a pathway to partnerships between an institution of higher education and Maryland's Indigenous communities, as Graham Smith argued, we as a higher education institution must first and foremost acknowledge the sovereignty, agency, and authority Indigenous people have over their knowledge and practices, as well as the abusive history of colonial research in Indigenous contexts. We must commit to reconciliation and Indigenous self-determination, recognize the worldview of Indigenous communities as innately valuable, and an essential piece of our collective human understandings and consciousness. And we must actively pursue decolonization through indigenizing education. This happens through the centralization of Maryland's Indigenous people and their own perspectives across educational spaces, by honoring and respecting Indigenous ways of knowing and being, by showing reverence for Indigenous views of spirituality, and disseminating co-constructed findings in ways that respect Indigenous sovereignty over Indigenous knowledge. As Linda Tahiwai Smith, a Maori education researcher in New Zealand, stated in a book, Decolonizing Methodologies, Research, and Indigenous People, the act of reclaiming, reformulating, and reconstituting Indigenous cultures and languages have required the mounting of an ambitious research program, one that is very strategic in its purpose and activities and relentless in its pursuit of social justice. In her book, Dr. Smith outlines a series of concrete strategies that can bring about liberatory outcomes for Indigenous peoples. These strategies highlight the survival, recovery, development, and self-determination of Indigenous communities. Some strategies critical to our discussion related to partnerships include centralizing the perspectives and voices of Indigenous people and their own stories in their own words and imagery, giving Indigenous communities a voice in our collective culture, developing a shared vision of a new, more hopeful future, reframing histories and stories from Indigenous perspectives to build greater understanding of issues facing Indigenous communities, building local, national, and international networks that support relationships between Indigenous communities and people, fostering the creativity of Indigenous people to imagine new futures and to exercise self-determination, sharing knowledge and disseminating results as a critical form of resistance, and connecting Indigenous people to each other through common stories. In response to MCIA's Pathway to Partnership initiative, I fielded the question, how do we as an institute of higher education develop viable and sustainable pathways for meaningful partnerships that can continue in perpetuity, to colleagues and administrators at the University of Maryland, College Park? One primary recommendation I received was the formation of a coalition comprised of Institute of Higher Education members and Indigenous representatives that focus on the decolonization efforts described previously. Institutes of higher education are decentralized academic institutions. This is beneficial because a coalition, like the one described, could independently meet with academic leadership across campus to collaborate in policies that attend to issues in unit-specific ways. For example, to attend to issues pertaining to the recruitment and retention of Indigenous students on campus, the coalition could collaborate with the offices of undergraduate and graduate admissions, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Diversity Education Task Force, the Office of Undergrad Studies, and the American Indian Student Union to develop targeted recruitment and retention strategies that support Indigenous students and their families. To attend to the need for cultural education of the campus community, the coalition could collaborate with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Diversity Education Task Force, and the Office of Undergrad Studies to develop courses and trainings that centralize Indigenous people and their perspectives, educate the campus community on the people native to this region, and examine Maryland's relationships with these communities over time, current issues faced by the communities in Maryland, and develop strategic efforts to include and support their viability, health, and sovereignty. Finally, to address representation of Indigenous people and perspectives among faculty and staff, the coalition could collaborate with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the Office of University Advancement. There are a number of critical components needed for a coalition such as this to also be effective. They're guided by what Kirkness and Barnhart and later Tesserow describe as 5 R's: respect, reciprocity, relevance, responsibility, and relationships, including positioning Indigenous authorities to guide and sponsor the work as mentors to members of the Institute of Higher Education, developing lifelong relationships that transcend beyond the scope of the coalition itself, seeking the assistance of Maryland's Indigenous communities to attain outcomes that are beneficial to them, and engaging in ethical, performative, healing, transformative, decolonizing, and participatory collaborations that are committed to dialogue, community, self-determination, cultural autonomy, justice, and equity. One way to envision the integrated work of such a coalition is through Micmac elder Albert Marshall's analogy of two-eyed seeing, where we learn to see from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and from the other with the strengths and ways of knowing that are Western eyes. But most importantly, learning to see with both eyes together for the benefit of all. The last thing I really want to talk about is partnerships in perpetuity. Because as I shared, institutes of higher education are decentralized academic institutions. While there are a number of benefits to this organizational structure, it also leads to deficits in achieving social justice and equity, because academic units can autonomously pursue initiatives that support social justice for Indigenous people and communities, or they can ignore the need to do so altogether. In addition, without established institutional level policies to guide academic units as they take on initiatives to support Indigenous communities, there's no guarantee they'll be maintained when employees leave a unit. Thus, in many ways, our decentralized structure supports individualism over collectivism, which can be fleeting. An example of this weakness is that there have been previous efforts in the Office of Admissions to target recruitment and retention of Indigenous students, but when the staff member directing those initiatives left, the efforts left with them as well. In order for us to establish a perpetual partnership among Indigenous communities and institutes of higher education, we must develop institutional level policies that establish, foster, and require such a participation across our collective academic units. Our institution can look at other universities, such as Northwestern, University of Minnesota, and many others, to identify institutional level policies that support perpetual partnerships with local Indigenous communities. As the flagship public University of Maryland, the University of Maryland College Park is one of a dozen University of Maryland system schools. Thus, the University of Maryland Park's commitment to the development of institutional level policies can have the potential to have widespread positive impacts for partnerships with Indigenous communities across the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Dr. Stoltz. Next is Ms. Kimberly Quayle. I believe you're on mute.
Hello.
There you go.
My dog was barking. I just couldn't take the chance.
Right.
I wanted to say thank you, first of all, Keith. I reached out to Keith about a month ago, I think, and I wanted to get some information about Native Americans and tribal organizations in Maryland, because we, have been receiving some funding through Behavioral Health Administration. And I must say, I just didn't have the knowledge or, too much understanding of what's going on here in Maryland. And I'm so grateful, just by hearing everyone tonight and just by doing my research these last couple of weeks. And I appreciate the invite from everyone for this evening. So let me start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about possible partnership and funding. But before we talk about that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about this particular funding. So in 2017, the OOCC, Maryland's Opioid Operational Command Center, was established by executive order as part of Governor Hogan's administration on heroin and opioid prevention and treatment enforcement initiative. Also in 2017, BHA received a $10 million funding from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which we call, known as SAMHSA. So the State Targeted Response STR grant, which we know as MORE, Maryland Opioid Rapid Response, was strategically aligned with the goals of the OOCC, which was to enhance and to expand on efforts to address Maryland's opioid crises and fulfill the state's overdose response priorities. So, overall, the project goals of MORE were to prevent opioid misuse and abuse through enhanced prescriber practices and public awarenesses, to treat opioid dependence by expanding treatment and increasing quality, to reduce the unmet treatment needs of opioid-related deaths within the state of Maryland, to prevent overdose fatalities throughout the state of Maryland, to expand on naloxone use in the state of Maryland, to expand recovery support services in the state of Maryland. And what we did at Behavioral Health Administration was, within the MORE initiative, which the MORE initiative was 2 years. Each year was $10 million. And the MORE initiative was broken into 2 sections. It was prevention and treatment. And in the prevention initiatives, we had harm reduction, naloxone distribution, social marketing, which was statewide. We had student assistance programs, workforce development and training programs. Within the treatment section of the MORE initiative, we had enhanced opioid treatment initiatives, reentry programs for peer recovery support, expansion of ASAM level 3.1, startup assistance for expansion of 3.7 crisis services and residential treatment. And during the 2 years of the MORE initiative, the Maryland Crisis Stabilization Center in Baltimore City was established. We also served a number of individuals in our crisis services, about 3,000, about 600 to 780 individuals in our Crisis Stabilization Center were served during the first year to second year of the MORE initiative. We also expanded MAT support in the Crisis Stabilization Center, also in the 3.7. About 3,000 individuals were also served there. In 2018, BHA was also awarded another $50 million through SAMHSA. This was called the Soar Initiative, and this was the State Opioid Response Grant. So what the SOAR grant did was we built upon services or initiatives that were started in the MORE grant. So the initiatives that we chose were based on evidence that they could reduce some of the following problems: the number of unintentional opioid overdoses, that we could possibly leverage existing projects through grant dollars, and that we could expand on Maryland's current opioid response plans and harm reduction initiatives. So where does all of this lead us? To some of the SOAR project goals. So we wanted to deliver evidence-based treatment initiatives that include some of the 3 medications approved by the FDA. We wanted to expand on MAT for OUD use. We wanted to reduce opioid-related overdose deaths. Some of the accomplishments that we, through the SOAR, from September 30th, 2018 through September 20th, 2020, included 43,000 individuals that received naloxone training, 86,000 naloxone doses. We also had at least 200 people that received expert training, 22,000 people that received peer encounters. We had at least 41,000 people that received positive expert program and brief interventions. So where does this bring us to? One of the reasons that I reached out to Keith, in September of this year, we received another $50 million grant through SAMHSA to expand on more of the Soar initiatives. And we wanted to, not only do we want to expand on initiatives in Baltimore or throughout Maryland, but we also wanted to reach out to the Native American and tribe and tribal organizations within the Maryland thing. So where does that lead us? So the purpose of the funding was to write an RFP, and I've also enlisted Mr. Keith to sit on our panel. So we wanted to create a new and innovative initiative. This is what the RFP is going to be, to provide outreach and information and education on opioid and stimulant use training for prevention strategies, including naloxone and Narcan use and distribution, harm reduction services, health education, and referral linkages to treat recovery and recovery supports. This initiative will provide American Indian and tribal organizations access to culturally relevant and evidence-based support to address harm reduction strategies and/or factors related to opioid use disorders. It will also implement prevention and education services, including trainings of peers and the development of evidence-based community prevention efforts for stimulant use within the tribal communities.
Ms. Quez, your camera's covered up.
Oh, is it really?
There we go.
Down. Okay, my little cheat sheet. So within the month of December, we will be developing an RFP. And once the RFP is developed, we will be disseminating the RFP through the local jurisdictions within the state of Maryland. And hopefully with the help of Keith, we will be reaching out to the Native American and tribal organizations. The amount of money that we're going to be putting into this RFP as of now is unknown, but we appreciate any help and assistance that we can get from your community. So that's what I have to talk about tonight. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Quells. And this is a really incredible amount of information. When I think about when we were putting this together and serving as a moderator here, I wanted just to really to state purposely the three individuals and entities that were chosen. We really wanted to get a well-rounded, as much as we can with what time we had, of entities that truly within the tribal communities and with Indigenous people that do need to be strengthened. And I can tell you that with the information that's been presented here and with the desire to work with our tribal communities and to work with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, that this has truly been very productive in what has been shared with the brief time that we have. I probably would love to see, as a moderator and as an administrative director, doing more of this with the three of you and seeing where we could expound this even more so. So with that being said, I'd like to go into our question and answer time. I would like to remind everyone that if you do have a question, which some of you have already been doing, using the chat area, if you do not know where that's at, or if you're just now joining us virtually, look to your right hand or right of the screen, and you'll see again the chat symbol. And then if you'll type your question in the lower right hand corner, we'll be asking Commissioner Peter Brooks if he would read out some of these questions that may just not be coming to us. So if you would like to do so, please share your questions. And we're going to ask Commissioner Peter Brooks, if he would, to read out the question and acknowledge the panelists that it may be pertaining to.
Okay. The first couple of questions are for Dr. Stoltz. And if you could just go over these for purposes of people that don't have the chat.
Sure.
Does the University of Maryland have any Native American history courses? And if not, will there be? And I guess you could expand that to recruitment and employment as well.
Okay, so we'll start with courses. And I did put a link in the chat directly to a course on Native American studies. The Native American courses are really housed in American studies. So you can find some courses there. My personal perspective is we have enormous work to do in this area. And I also responded in the chat that a number of us, the courses I teach are for teacher preparation or for teacher education, because I'm in the College of Education. So I work with pre-service and in-service teachers. So my courses aren't focused exclusively on Indigenous education, but I embed Indigenous education and issues pertaining to Indigenous education, supporting Indigenous students in K-12 classrooms into my courses. So there are a number of us on campus who infuse Indigenous issues and perspectives into our courses, although it's not exclusively about that. One of my colleagues, Jing Lin, focuses on Indigenous Eastern perspectives and knowledge, but she also connects those Eastern perspectives with Western Indigenous perspectives. So again, there are a number of us who are doing some of that work, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. And I think that it's really important for us to begin to develop courses, particularly about local tribal histories and the local current issues, because there's a general ignorance and, across the Institute of Higher Ed, and that's faculty and students and all of us, a general ignorance about the local communities, the histories of the local communities, and the needs of the local communities. So I think that that is an essential thing that needs to be built in. And I do think that this is some work that we could do as a coalition in a collaborative way. The other things you asked, Peter, you asked about recruitment and retention as well.
Yes, and there are questions about scholarships.
Yeah, okay. So recruitment, retention, and scholarships. I had a meeting with our office admissions, about 5 different recruitment officers at the Office of Admissions, and there's no policy right now. And this is why I brought it up in my my presentation as a panelist, because there has been a previous practice supported by a staff member who was Native. I think she was Nansemond, and she helped to connect the recruitment officers with the local Native communities. So that connection helped to foster that recruitment strategy, right? When she left her position, that initiative left with her. I've talked with my administrators about this when I was trying to figure out what pathways could I really talk about to this group that are viable, because I don't want to propose strategies that aren't going to be pursuable, right? And I brought up my meeting with the admissions group, and they're 100% committed to recruiting and retaining Indigenous students, but they don't know who to connect with. So their request was to know who to contact, where they should be, and they will show up. I think that is positive, right? That they're willing and they're gonna go. If we tell them where they need to go, they're gonna make sure that they're there because they want to do the work and they believe the work is important. On the other hand, I also think that it's a failure to acknowledge the requirement that they do that work without someone directing it, right? This is work that has to be done, right? And initiated as a commitment to equity and diversity on campus, right? And this is a community that hasn't been actively served. So I see it kind of as two sides. And this is why I think that a coalition that meets with admissions could work with them to develop a strategy for recruitment and retention, and to help the admissions office understand the right points of contact, right, and the right places to target recruitment. However, without an institutional policy or a policy at that unit that's going to be sustained, then that practice could then again fall apart like it has before. So I'm for coalition work that's collaborative, but I'm also for an underlying policy that can transcend each of us as individuals, right? Because we need to have something that we know is a long-term commitment. So that's like recruitment and retention. And the last part was about scholarships. Well, I mean, my children are Native, and there are tons of Native scholarships for Native Americans, but the University of Maryland specifically doesn't have a scholarship targeted for local Native people. This was also something that I discussed with administration because a colleague of mine is Mi'kmaq, and one of the things that we talked about was that because her children were Native, they could go to school for free in their state, right? And so this is a practice that I think is worth pursuing. Now, I'm not the president of the institution, right? I'm a low woman in the levels, and I'm faculty, but I have voiced this issue to my dean, who is much higher than I am, and my dean is very responsive. She's committed to anti-racist practices and to social justice, and has committed to moving these questions, concerns, and ideas forward up to the president's level. So I think that is positive, but I do think that again, it's an institutional commitment that needs to be established, that speaks to our support of local Indigenous youth, and I think that is something that has not happened at the highest administrative level yet at the University of Maryland or across the University of Maryland systems, and something I would love to see unfold through collaboration and momentum.
Another question for you, and I'll dovetail this question to Dr. Wilson. Support for preschool, early childhood education regarding Indigenous culture and perspectives. And I wanted to dovetail that to Dr. Wilson to find out if there were similar things that the African American Commission is doing for the African American culture in terms of preschool, early childhood. Dr. Stoltz, are there any
early childhood education is not my space, so I can't speak as an expert on early childhood education programs. So I would say I'm the wrong person to answer that question specifically. I can say in terms of our K-12 curriculum related to Indigenous culture and perspectives, we're failing. And this is work that the Education Commission at the Maryland Indian Commission has also recognized, that we failed to infuse Indigenous culture and perspectives in our K-12 curriculum across the state of Maryland. So this is work that's definitely needed in terms of pre-K materials. This is just not my wheelhouse. So I'm sorry, but I can't really respond very well to that particular topic.
So if I understand the question correctly, are you asking if we have programs for preschool students?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, yes. So all of our programs are geared for young people across the spectrum, K through 12, preschool up to adult. We have also participated in national programs where we've had persons come in to train teachers so that they are culturally sensitive to the African American students, and being able to develop curriculum around these types of things that we do with our commission.
Okay, good. Let's see. I had a question about, or a statement about Native American Lifelines awarded the SOR grant that was unfulfilled due to partnerships with BCHD being suspended due to COVID. And they've been doing Narcan training for about 5 years. I don't know if Dr. Qualls wanted to respond to that.
So yes, actually, you should probably get in touch with the health department, because they are planning on, there was an extension put on the, there was a no-cost extension for SOAR year 1, year 2, SOAR 1 for that. So it was extended out for a whole nother year. They probably should have reached out to you by now, since your contract was with the health department and we funded the health department. So you're actually a sub-vendor. So it was picked back up again. It was placed on hold because of COVID, but they actually will be picking that back up again. So hopefully someone will be reaching out to you for that. So.
Dr. Qualls, are there any other programs that?
I wish there was a doctor. So.
Sorry. Ms. Qualls, are there any other programs that the Native community should be made aware of that you think perhaps we're not taking advantage of?
Well, unfortunately, there was that MOTA, the Minority Outreach and Technical Assistance Program, that you're right, Native American Lifelines did apply, and I wish I would have reached out to Keith then, but we were throwing money at them. We actually reached out to them and said, you don't want more? So, but this go round, we won't make the same mistake. So with this new RFP, we will not make the same mistake again. So we have our contacts, and we will make sure that we do everything possible to reach out to the community.
And Dr. English, as chair of the oldest ethnic commission, do you have any advice for our commission, things that we should perhaps be looking at that we may not be taking advantage of?
Well, yes. I think one of the very important things that I would recommend would be to use your voice in the community. One of the things, at least for us, that we found to be something that's beneficial, that has worked for us, I should say, is that you can't wait for others to include you in the conversation. And so we've learned to use our voices. We have empowered ourselves by speaking up. We ask the very hard questions that people are not willing to ask. We have learned to not wait for someone else to ask a question for us. If, for example, there are grants that are out there that African-American sites and organizations have traditionally been left out of. So we ask the question, where is the diversity? Why aren't African-Americans qualifying for these grants? And we're asking those questions to people who have the answers. And we are asserting ourselves in conversations where traditionally we've been left out. So I think that is a place where your commission can empower yourselves and your cause is by getting out there and being involved, connecting with a commission like ours. We are out there moving forward. The programs that we have we can partner with you. Our communities are more alike than we are different. So there are opportunities for us to work together and to make your voice a lot more powerful in collaboration with us, and vice versa. So that would be the advice I would offer.
Very generous offer. And what programs do you think specifically? Do you have any offhand that you can talk about?
The one that I mentioned earlier about our anti-racism initiative, that is an initiative that is not just about African Americans. It really is about, as I said, dismantling white supremacy. There is enough to go around for everyone. All of our voices need to be heard. And so there needs to have, we need to have these conversations about telling the truth. And for the most part, truth is not told until someone asks a question. And so I would invite you to come and to participate with us in our anti-racism initiative. I believe our executive director is on the line, Chanel Compton. Our programs are through the Banneker Douglas Museum, and she can offer you, she says she's here, so she can offer you direction on how to connect with us and perhaps partner in a strong, significant way on that initiative.
Very good. And so for those who didn't get that, that is an invitation to work with the African American Commission on anti-racism legislation and education within the state. That's an open opportunity for anyone. Did have another question. Can we count on you as an ally in accurate data collection for American Indians, Alaska Natives in the state of Maryland? We are currently counted as white, Black, or other, and despite the protests of data collectors, our numbers do matter. Question for anyone.
I just in the chat responded to Jessica that I agree 100%, and I've made this argument as well. I've sat in doctoral courses in my doctoral program where no Native population data is presented, and when I questioned why they were not in the data, the response was the population was so small it was not significant enough to present. And inside, you know, this fire is just blazing when you think about the historical component that led to the reason why Indigenous populations are so low, right? And so it's just a further, that to me is another act of colonial kind of practices where the idea is to completely remove the Native perspective, the Native people, the Native voice. So it's just a perpetuation of these historical issues. And unless we change that fundamentally at every level, then we're going to continue to have these kinds of things where Native people, Native voices aren't at the forefront of discussions.
You know, if I might say this.
Yes, please.
If I might say that this is a great opportunity for your commission to challenge that very thing. Mm-hmm. You know, you have the power to write a letter to someone and question why there is not a box for us to check. It's helpful that other people can ask the question for you, but it is more powerful when it comes from within the community that we want to have a box to represent our community, and that's important.
Ms. Qualls, did you want to?
Yeah, I agree 110%. I actually asked for some data this morning from some of the IT people for public behavioral health. And I didn't run into that problem. I guess I didn't dig deep enough, but they did have it labeled as American Indians. Of course, my dog would do that. That's what I was concerned about. But I knew it was going to happen eventually. But and they pulled it. They did pull it up. But I need to dig deeper. I need to see what they actually pulled it up as, because I asked for American Indian, and I wonder. Now I'm wondering if they had to, if it was pulled up as something else in addition to that. So now it's piquing my interest. Like if I said one thing and they translated it into something else. So yeah, it is something to think about. So now I need to see what happened.
Any final thoughts or issues statements you'd like to say to the American Indian community here on the verge of Native American Heritage Month for 2020 for all panelists? Your final comments.
My final comment is to Carrie. There is power in coalitions. Please do not say your voice does not matter. It does matter.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I am grateful. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the knowledge. And I am looking forward to a partnership. Thank you so much.
And I also just appreciate being given the opportunity to be a part of this space and community. And I do really hope that we're able to collaborate on some initiatives to follow through with the changes that we definitely need to make in our educational spaces. So I appreciate this chance, and I do look forward to trying to forge some paths ahead that encourage positive changes.
Awesome. All right. Well, Keith, as Riza Davis said, thank you very much for the invite. An amazing group of panelists, and I think we all look forward to forging new relationships.
I agree. I would echo those words, Commissioner Brooks. Again, it's just been incredible. I've been sitting here listening to every word taken in. I truly look forward to enhancing the relationship that we have with our fellow ethnic commission, and of course with you, Reverend Dr. Wilson. I'm looking forward to seeing how many of our tribal communities and organizations will be also reaching out to Ms. Kimberly Quayles, and also the work that we've somewhat initiated, the think tank groups, and also the future initiatives and events that we got planned for the University of Maryland College Park, which hopefully will spread out to the other universities and other higher levels of other institutions throughout, not just one particular area of Maryland, whether it be Southern or Eastern Shore, but all over the state. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I can tell you what, I'm excited. I know our commissioners are, and I'm sure that during our December 8th meeting, we will be bringing this up and making this part of our strategic plan session that will take place in 2021. So I just want to say to each and every one of our panelists, as I said earlier when we started out, a phenomenal group, and you'll be getting phone calls from us sooner than later, trust me. So ladies and gentlemen, in your own little manner through the chat room, and if we can get our incredible Commissioner Brooks, give us a round of applause if you would for, again, what a great panel discussion. Pathways to Pathways. All right. Well, this time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be calling on Commissioner Guy Wells for the official reading of our Governor's Proclamation.
Evening, Keith. Keith, do you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just wasn't hearing everybody. The State of Maryland Proclamation from the Governor of the State of Maryland, American Indian Heritage Month, November 2020. Whereas the assemblage of the American Indian in the state of Maryland is immense, stretching from the mountains to the beautiful shores of the Chesapeake Bay and beyond. And whereas many of our islands, towns, forests, trails, rivers, streams, and historical landmarks bear connection to our indigenous tribes, clans, bands, groups of Indians, and whereas the humble members of the Commission on Indian Affairs have demonstrated a steadfast commitment to edify the public with infallible facts and spirit of the American Indian people. And whereas during a time of pandemic, commissioners of the tribal leaders of the state of Maryland supported initiatives to further progress for health and indigenous families. And whereas the state of Maryland celebrates the culture and history of all Native peoples, including members of Maryland's state recognized tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Piscataway Conoy tribe, and the Acahonic tribe. Whereas indigenous peoples celebrate over 40 years of service by the Commission on Indian Affairs and by regulation, establish and oversee a process for an Indian community that is indigenous to the state to apply to the Commission for recognition of Maryland Indian status. And whereas Maryland is pleased to recognize November as American Indian Heritage Month, as we celebrate to designate November as one of the commemorative months in the state of Maryland, and all Marylanders are encouraged to acknowledge and join in this grand achievement. Now, therefore, I, Larry Hogan, Governor of the state of Maryland, do hereby proclaim November 2020 as American Indian Heritage Month in Maryland, and do commence this observance to all our citizens. Signed under my hand and the Great Seal of Maryland on this first day of November, 2020.
Thank you, Commissioner Wells. Well, folks, at this time, we're going to be turning our attention to our awards aspect of our celebration. And as you can see on your screen, for some of you, there are 3 awards that we provide and are providing for 2020. And that would be Youth of the Year, Adult of the Year, and Volunteer of the Year for those participating tribal communities and organizations. And without further ado, I'd like to call upon Commissioner Sherry Ayers, if you would present the Youth of the Year Awards for our tribal communities.
Thank you, Keith. Welcome, everybody, to the virtual Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. We thank you for being here tonight. We are extremely grateful to the tribal communities that participated in the Youth of the Year. I'm always excited to present this award. The MCIA purposely allows each community entity, tribal leader, tribal council, nonprofit organization to choose the nominee based on their knowledge, their awareness, and attributes of the individual. It's an opportunity for the tribal community to have their voice be heard and acknowledged by their standards and not that of a government entity. So the awardee tonight and the Youth of the Year is Miss Janelle Rodriguez. She was nominated by Native American Lifelines as the Youth of the Year. Janelle has been an active participant in our organization's annual gathering of Native Americans. These events are held to invite youth in identifying challenges within their Native community and to propose and take actions on solutions. To be effective, participants in these sessions must be willing to be vulnerable, honest, take health risk. Janelle demonstrated a desire to be actively involved in improving the Baltimore Native community and is open in sharing her thoughts and ideas. Janelle is generous with other participants, supportive and caring. She is the kind of leader Indian country will need. She's a good student, a member of the book club, finance club, and coding club. She loves reading, crafting, and animals. She hopes to one day become a marine biologist, but for now would just like to get some babysitting jobs. Again, the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs would like to congratulate our Youth of the Year awardee, Ms. Janelle Rodriguez. Please, everyone in the chat, congratulate her. We are so excited, and thank you for this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Ayers. And just as you may be witnessing, for those of us joining us virtually, that we are providing as much as we can to congratulate each one of our awardees. You'll find that for those of you who may be joining us by phone, you're missing out on the photographs and also the certificates that will be presented or sent to the individuals. Once again, we are dealing with COVID-19. And so for that reason, we'll make sure that the administrative staff will get not only Janelle, but also all the awardees, their certificates and items that normally would have come to them in person. We'll make sure we get it to them via mail. At this time, I'd like to call upon Vice Chair Robert Guidas, if he wouldn't mind to present and announce the Adults of the Year from our tribal communities. Vice Chair Robert Guidas, Bob Guidas. We may have lost him there. Again, Vice Chair Guidas. We'll give him an opportunity to make sure he's just trying to unmute himself. Bob Guidas, are you with us? Just give us a moment, folks. I'm sure he's just trying to unmute his phone. All of us have had that trouble in the past. Commissioner Vice Chair Robert Guidas, if you're with us, could you unmute your phone, as we'll be asking you to present the Adults of the Year. Bob Guidas. All right. Well, what I will do at this point in time, so we don't hold anyone up, we're going to be asking Commissioner Brooks if you will assist with the slides, and I will be reading the information to everyone and continue with this celebration. So our first awardee, and let me, before we go there, we followed suit with exactly what Commissioner Sherry Ayers mentioned in reference to how these individuals were selected, not by us, MCIA as a state commission, but again, by the tribal community. So again, I echo those words that Commissioner Ayers provided concerning the selection and how they were brought to us by the MCIA. With that being said, our first awardee is Mr. Danny Michael Hinman. Mr. Danny Michael Hinman, nominated by the Algonquin tribe. Danny Michael Hinman made his way, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, to the spirit world on July 25th, 2020. So again, this is posthumously being given to Mr. Danny Michael Hinman. He was a river guide since 1995 and a proud Algonquin tribal member. Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs bestows this memorialization in its sincere gratitude to Danny Michael Hinman. We're given posthumously. I'd also like to comment, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward to his slide and his certificate, is that his tribal members and his community are joining us by phone. I was told by Commissioner Guidus, and we're very thankful that they were able to join us or are joining us by telephone. I was told that they were joining us at the community center and that they were gathering around. So we're hopefully that they will be able to take some photographs of people coming together and celebrating, again, their adult of the year and one of our adults of the year by the MCIA, Mr. Danny Michael Hinman.
Give me a second.
Our second awardee. Yeah, there we go. A couple of rounds of applause for him. There we go. Our second awardee, ladies and gentlemen, is Miss Hope Butler. Hope Butler, nominated by the Chaptico Band of the Piscataway Conoy tribe, awarded as a result of her work in acquiring and disseminating PPE items to safeguard our people from contracting and spreading COVID-19 to members of the Native community without considering, again, tribal affiliation or nationality. Successfully eliciting support from churches in 3 counties, ladies and gentlemen, to provide areas that aided in the distribution of masks and other PPE items. Garnered support from members of the Native communities to assist with directing traffic, obtaining tribal information, health status for, and having a well-coordinated distribution network over several months, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Butler is a member of the Cedarville Band of Piscataway and worked hand in hand with her tribal band leadership, the Piscataway Indian Nation and the Chaptico Band of Indians to acquire the PPEs, and in doing so, to help so many. So ladies and gentlemen, we congratulate our second awardee, Ms. Hope Butler. We now go to our third awardee, ladies and gentlemen. And we congratulate Adult of the Year, Annie Arundel. Annie Arundel was nominated by Native American Lifelines. The mother of 4, Annie of the Navajo Nation, is married to a Monkey tribal member and has spent the past 5 years educating the public on Native tribes and issues. In 2019, recognized by the County Executive of Calvert Ball with a Native American Heritage Award as a result of her showcasing 8 different tribes and traditions during the first ever Howard County Native American Heritage Month celebration. On September 15, 2020, all was on hand to accept the declaration of the County Executive and Council declared it would now recognize Indigenous Peoples Day over Columbus Day in a ceremony that featured the CEO of the Congress for American Indians, a recognition of her work. Well deserved to, again, our Adult of the Year, Miss Annie Arundel. Our fourth awardee for Adult of the Year, coming from our participating tribal communities and organizations, Ms. Aiden Alston. Aiden Alston, nominated by the Baltimore American Indian Center. Aiden Alston is currently a second-year student majoring in public health science at the University of Maryland, College Park. Serves as the secretary of the University of Maryland's American Indian Student Union. As Secretary of AISU in 2019, she attended the annual Big Ten Native Conference at the University of Indiana. She graduated from the Baltimore Polytechnic Institute in 2019. In 2017, she worked at the Johns Hopkins Whiting School of Engineering, where she conducted research on fiber optics and photonics, and was able to present her research at the National Science Foundation in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Adult of the Year, Ms. Aiden Alston. And our fifth awardee, ladies and gentlemen, for our 7th Annual American Indian Heritage Month, Adults of the Year, is Mr. Andrew Thompson IV. Mr. Andrew Thompson IV, nominated by the Native American Lifelines. Mr. Thompson is an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, referred to as a great asset to the Baltimore Native community. Dedication to sharing of cultural teachings with others and his commitment to ensuring Two-Spirit community members are seen and supported. During the early days of the pandemic, generously created and distributed over 500 cloth face masks to Native individuals and organizations who serve them. A 9-year veteran of the Army, ladies and gentlemen, rank of sergeant in both Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraq Freedom. Awarded for his valiance in service. Earned an AA in criminal justice and will graduate from the University of Baltimore in December. Andrew values higher education and will be graduating with honors magna cum laude. He currently serves on the board of directors at the Baltimore American Indian Center and is a valued member of the Two-Spirit community. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Andrew Thompson IV. Folks, I just want to speak on behalf of our Vice Chair, Robert Guidus, and I'm very fortunate that he's not with us at the moment for whatever reasons, but he wanted to wish everyone and speak in his own language, the Mohawk language, which again is a tradition of him and of his people, to congratulate each one of our awardees here tonight. It is unfortunate that I do not speak Mohawk, but I can say Yahweh in my language, the Skure language, to each and every one of these awardees. They do incredible work. Some of them I know personally, some of them I can't wait to get to know personally or just as much as I know the others. But I'm looking forward to you engaging yourself with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs in a variety of ways, which you can do through our committees, through coming to our meetings, as well as the events, and just like the event you're attending here tonight as an awardee. I could go on and on because we want you to know just how special you are to the people who nominated you, the organizations, your communities, and the people who brought you to our attention. So once again, congratulations to each one of our Adults of the Year. At this time, I'd like to call upon Commissioner Claude Bowen to do the honors concerning Volunteer of the Year. Commissioner Claude Bowen. Claude, if you're with us, if you might want to check your phone and unmute it. We want to make sure that we allow our commissioners to assist us again in presenting our awards here for the year. So again, Commissioner Claude Bowen, if you're still with us. Commissioner Claude Bowen. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to hold anyone up here. And I do want to congratulate this individual. And so, Commissioner Bowen, if you're not on the line, I'm going to go ahead and do the honors of presenting the award.
May have to hit *6 on their phone. That might help. *6 if you can hear me, Commissioner Bowen.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
Great, wonderful.
This is great. Thank you so much. Okay, sorry for that. The administrative staff of the commission and the commissioners work with many entities throughout the state of Maryland. And this work is ongoing. There's no real beginning or end to it. And for this reason, that we rely on volunteers throughout the communities to work with us, to carry out our programs and our initiatives. And our volunteer of the year this year has met with our administrative director in various places and at various times to transport items needed by his community and others down in Somerset County. In doing this, he also carries out a multitude of other duties for the tribe. It's for this reason that our final award is going to be given to an individual who asks nothing in return and gives all that he can. To see their community and others increase in opportunity and to be provided for where there is need, oftentimes going unnoticed and seeking no pats on the back. Our awardee is Mike Hinman. Mike Hinman is the tribal chair for the Ocohonic tribe. Mr. Hinman was instrumental in the tribal petition for Maryland Indians' tribal status. He has been a point of contact for all donations to the tribal community. In January of 2020, Mr. Hinman began another year of transporting items from various areas of the state back to the Eastern Shore, constantly volunteering hours of travel, carrying out heavy physical work, and awaiting the next opportunity to serve. He also serves as a tribal historian and elder of the community. I am very pleased to congratulate Mike Hinman as our 2020 Volunteer of the Year.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowen. We'd like to congratulate all of our awardees, ladies and gentlemen, in keeping with our culture and our traditions of Native America and as Indigenous people of culture. We'd like to call upon Mr. Duncan Munson to give all of our awardees and in a way of saying thank you to our panelists for, again, being here with us and supporting us in such a way. Duncan Munson is an accomplished cultural artist of Native America, competition dancer, singer, and hoop exhibitionist. He's also an EMT, ladies and gentlemen. And again, this man is very impressive, not just from a cultural standpoint, but again, just being a lifesaver. So as a first responder, we'd like to say thank you to him. And he's actually doing this as an extreme favor because he's doing what he loves to do, and that's saving people's lives. So again, we thank him for being here. And we call upon him now for an honor song.
hey, hi, oh, hey, 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 oh, hey, oh, hey, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, 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 oh, oh, hey, hey, oh, ah, hey, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, oh, hey, 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 oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, hey, oh, ah, hey, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, 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 oh, hey, oh, hey.
Oh, hmm, hmm.
Yahweh, Yahweh, thank you again for thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, panelists, and awardees, what an inspiring and thought-provoking event, one that is historic, being the first ever virtual kickoff. Please remain in touch with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, as well as the Governor's Office Community Initiatives. Continue to practice safe distancing and the use of PPEs. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, everybody, exercise your right to vote if you have not done so. This has been the 7th Annual Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs American Indian Heritage Month Kickoff. Thank you for your participation during this event. Please continue to network and share ideas that will strengthen our communities. We'll be doing so, ladies and gentlemen, as we have continuously done up through opportunity, fiscal responsibility, government efficiency, and customer service.